Hello, everyone. Welcome to Natty News, the nattiest news show in the world. My name is Anwar, and I'm joined with future physiotherapist Pat Wu. Pat, how are you doing, man? I know you've been drowned in those exams. How have those been for you?
I'm feeling good. I am 7 of 8 done. I did 4 in the last 2 days, but I think I passed them all. So that is the key.
Oh, dude, that is rough, man. When I hear that, it takes me back to when I was back in engineering and we'd have like those 8 midterms, and you just be like, this is too much. Like, I'm gonna have to fail one of these.
Yeah, I'm just happy I didn't fail any of them. So that's good. And so I hadn't worked out all week, and then I went to the gym last night, and I hit a snatch PR. I did 118 kilos, or 260 pounds. So really happy about that.
Nice, man. Well, I actually also hit a PR. So, for the listeners on YouTube who can see us, you might see me wearing the first official Natty News t shirt. And man, Pat, I'm not kidding you. I went to the gym wearing the Natty News t shirt. I threw on 5 wheels on the bench. We're talking about 495 pounds. Dude, I repped it for 30 times. I'm not even
Okay.
joking right now. I did 495 for 30 with the Nine News t-shirt, and like I took it off. I tried to do one and I crushed my septum. Like my whole chest is snapped up from that. But that Nine News t-shirt, man, that is more effective than any PED, road, slingshot, anything you got, man. Like it's gonna be banned soon. So definitely when we launch those, you have to cop yourself maybe 20 of them.
At least 20 of them. That's good to hear. And yeah, oh man, I'm excited to get mine and pick mine up soon. And we'll be wearing this at every podcast after that.
Oh man, dude, you're gonna be wearing it and you'll be ready for the Olympic team in no question. Natty News is gonna be banned from the Olympics with how many gains you get from this extra natty enhancing boost cloth material we developed.
That's what it is. Sweet.
But
All right,
anyway,
what are we talking about today?
well, so again, throughout the like last few episodes, as the listeners know, we've been doing your kind of like whole patch physio fun facts where you kind of drop some knowledge on us. And so we were talking before about what you've been learning is something that I think is super important that doesn't get talked about enough, and that is with about pain. uh, about kind of not only the pain but as well about strange and distinguishing the difference between them, also about like pain tolerance going through strange and injuries. And I think that's something that people don't really talk about enough, and there's a whole misconception about, you know what, no pain no gain. And I want to get to the bottom of this, Pat. I want to know how much you really have to suffer in the gym to make gains, and it seems like you've studied a lot about it. So I guess to start off is, I guess maybe a very high level question is, Pat, why do we need to feel pain in the gym? Why does the gym have to be suffering?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. So let's always start with the definition. Pain, according to like the most recent research, well, we call pain like it's a sensory or emotional experience that's may or may not be associated with tissue damage. So that's really important. So like just because I think it sounds very simple, but everyone thinks about it, they associate with tissue damage, right? Not necessarily. And so that starts to answer your question that, maybe we don't always have to be in a lot of pain to get results, because the definition of pain is not a sensory experience that results in massive natty gains, right? So I think it's for those of you who like go to the gym and they're just always looking to be in pain and being burning, that's maybe not necessary, because how you actually make progress in the gym is to progressive overload, is to train close to your maximum, train with intensity. But I don't think you always have to put yourself in like, super quad drop sets, like where your biceps are burning, and you definitely should not put yourself in joint pain in order to build some muscle or get stronger.
So I actually want to ask about that because you're mentioning that pain is a sensory feeling we get when we may or may not have damaged tissue. But now, when we talk about damaged tissue, are we including like the breakdown of muscle fibers to gain muscle, like is that considered a like when we get that burning sensation, we do like a quadruple drop set, like would that be indicated as a pain sense?
Yeah, you can definitely have like that kind of pain. Yeah, any type of generalized tissue damage or no tissue damage can give you pain, and that's the complicated thing, right? Like for example, people who are like some people are just very a lot more sensitive to like negative perception. So yeah, like that can be considered pain. Um, Pricking your finger can be considered pain. Like yeah, any type of tissue damage can give you pain or not pain. It can give you no pain.
All right, so you kind of like jumped the gun and you were mentioning about how like you don't really think you need to go through that much pain to make gains because as you said the most important thing is progressive overload, and as well pain doesn't always indicate that there is tissue damage. Um
Exactly.
and so the old saying, no pain, no gain.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times people kind of get in that mentality of like you need to suffer a bit in the gym. And I
Yeah.
definitely feel that too. Like I feel like, you gotta work hard in the gym. You gotta get tired. You gotta get muscles have to be tired. You gotta feel that fire. Um so why is that not entirely true? So why is it that you might not need to feel that insane burning sensation to make gains?
Yeah. So because I think that the main reason is that pain is an unreliable narrator. So
Mm,
it it gives you a very generalized sense of some sort of, unpleasant sensation. But that unpleasant sensation, like for example, probably the most painful thing in the gym is to do like a drop set, right? Like finish a set, take off weight, do more, take off weight, do more. Like, and what actually causes the most pain when you're doing that shoulder press drop set and you do that empty bar, is that necessarily what's creating the most muscle breakdown or giving you the most progress? Not necessarily, and it's not always linear like that, right? If you just wanted to have pain, you know, do a CrossFit class that gets your heart rate up to 160 and you stay there for 2 hours. That is more painful than doing probably 8 sets of 3 squats at 80%. But perhaps if you're looking to build your quads and glutes and get stronger, I would argue that 8 sets of 3 was better than the CrossFit workout that had 500 reps of leg exercises, and made the legs hurt. But that hurt was not, you know, in line with what you're looking for, right? Like it's endurance work almost a lot of the time that gives you that most pain. And if you're looking for strength or hypertrophy, those things don't necessarily align.
See, and you bring up a good point with that, and it's something I've actually been curious about. Now, I like to do drop sets because, I'm a bit of a meathead and I like that burning feeling, and I
Yeah.
feel like I'm doing work, even though you were probably going to show me that I'm not doing as much as I thought. But the idea of like a drop set is like, for those who might not be familiar with it, let's say you're doing some bench press, and let's say you're benching 135 pounds, you get 10 reps, then you drop the weight down to maybe 95 pounds, and then you can get maybe another 10 reps, and maybe you drop it to the bar, so 45 pounds, you get another 10 reps. And so at the very end, when you're just doing the bar, you get super fatigued and you get a lot of that burning sensation. You feel like you've really broken down the muscle. But I was kind of thinking, like, if you went and you just did 30 straight reps with, let's say, 80 pounds, you're going to kind of get that same feeling. But then when you do that, people are like, you're just doing endurance work. You're not building any muscle doing that. So it always made me kind of curious about why is it a drop set? You're building so much muscle, but you're doing 30 straight reps. Oh, you're not doing any building any muscle. You're just doing endurance work. Like, it always kind of confused me about how effective really are drop sets.
Ah, well, that's a great question. Now part of this is theoretical, so you scientists out there don't flock me on this. But let's go back a little bit to our knowledge of physics, Anwar, which you have taught me everything I know about it. Um, there's in order to build muscle, there needs to be a cell signal in response to a stimulus. Like there some stimulus went in and your cell signal was like, oh crap, we just got attacked. We gotta level up, basically, right? Now, if the stimulus level is too low, so let's say 80 pounds was only 40% of your max, your muscles like, okay, that kind of hurt, but we're good. We can handle 80 pounds. Now 135, maybe that was 75 to 80%. And that threshold used to be is usually around 70% of your max. When you do that kind of weight, your muscles in response will be like, we have trouble. We're being attacked by something way too strong. We need to level up. So that's why there's a difference there. You need to at least once in a while work at those higher percentages in order to induce the maximum growth. Now, how a drop set works is, in my opinion, it's like, when you're like grinding out and everyone's like one more, one more. It is probably good to do it, but if you don't, I don't think it's the biggest deal in the world. A drop set extends the stress stimulus. Like, it creates more blood flow to the area. More blood flow does create more of a response. And it does potentially cause a little bit more micro tears in the muscle. But that was a difference, right? Because you already got that heavy range stimulus. That's that main stimulus. And the drop set is kind of icing on the cake, right? Perhaps if you don't have time to do many sets, that's good to create more micro damage in a set amount of time.
Okay, so that makes a lot of sense. And so would you kind of say that like that signal, is that the key to creating muscle? Like, would you say that's more important than the micro tears?
Um, it's so the pathway is sort of this: you work out, you create damage or
Hmm.
micro tears in a muscle, um, and then what happens is step two is you actually get an inflammatory response. So you get inflammation. So this is why you shouldn't take anti-inflammatories after you work out, because the first step is damage, then inflammation begins, and then repair happens. And lastly, it's called remodeling. So we think of like our structural model, right? Like, oh shit, we've been attacked. Let's find help. Let's make upgrades, and then you end up with the bigger, stronger muscle. So the damage is the precursor to the signal. Yeah.
Okay. No, I understand. That makes sense. Yeah, and so the reason why like most people say the bodybuilding you should do like that 8 to 12, 8 to 15 rep range is because it's a heavy enough load within your body sending those signals. Like that's kind of the value of doing those heavier weights when doing any type of bodybuilding training, right?
Exactly. Like exercise, all exercise is good, but if you have that specific goal of building muscle or strength, there's a threshold. And the theory is that if you don't reach that threshold, you're perhaps not causing enough to um, to initiate the signal. And without the signal, you might not be getting any adaptation.
And man, see, and that's why like the progression is so valuable for all your goals. Like even if you just want to look better, like you don't give a crap about being strong or anything. It
Yeah.
really does show that you do need to have that progression in weight to kind of send those signals to get that muscle engagement. It's a little funny. Have you ever seen those memes where it's like, "Oh no, I did 13 reps. Now I'm not going to make any gains. I did one too
Yeah.
many. It has to
Yeah.
be 8 to 12."
Exactly, exactly. And it's like, hey, I think like 5, 6 years ago, I would believe that too. And then I think when and that's what we like to do here when we kind of break down the science into what's practical, it's like, wait, there's no stress. It's like you're good, but you do need to make sure you get a good enough stimulus that something happens for you.
Oh man, I remember seeing like this one like meme or something where it was like, okay, if you're strength training, you train between 1 to 5 reps. If you're doing bodybuilding, you do 8 to 12. If you do 6 or 7, you get nothing. Six to
Yeah.
seven reps are useless.
Yeah, actually, when I became a trainer, even in my early years of kinesiology education, that was written down. And I was like, so what happens at 6 to 7?
I know.
What happens at 81%? Like, what's going on? Like, does this am I in no man's land? Like, what? How do I know what 80% is if I never worked out? There's a lot of things that, yeah, there's what the books tell you, and then there's what's practical.
Yeah, it's that forbidden zone. Once you get into those numbers, man, those are some forbidden. You actually lose gains at those reps.
Oh man, yeah, yeah. This is why you can't read textbooks when you're trying to learn how to work out.
All right, so let's get back to the idea of pain, though. So what you're kind of saying is that like the key about gaining muscle, as we've talked about, is getting those signals and getting your body being like, oh crap, We need to get stronger. We need to add on. So let's start putting some resources to fixing and building up. So that's all great. Um, and so the pain we feel, like that fire burn we feel, comes from the micro tears that's breaking us down. So I guess my next question is like, could you still build muscle without feeling any of that burning sensation? And would it be still as optimal, or would you get suboptimal gains by doing that?
Yes. So the soreness that you feel is not necessarily correlated directly with with the amount of damage, right? So it's not like if you were in this much pain this workout, that doesn't mean you have that much more damage. It's a lot of things are dependent on pain, right? Like for example, I don't like Anwar, if you've ever been in like a sport competition and you're really hyped, right? Like maybe your first BJJ competition, every little injury you had suddenly did not hurt, right? All of a sudden,
Yeah.
right? Now, or you had a little injury and then you went to massage or you did hot tub. Hurts less. Did you cure the injury? No. You just down-regulated the pain response to your body. So a lot of factors come into play there. Like some people are just naturally more anxious and they're more emotionally stimulated. Those people tend to feel more pain because they're just more aware of it. Whereas like I would infer contact sport athletes, just like a little scratch to them is literally nothing. Like it just does not bother them at all, which is why we talk about that pain as an unreliable narrator. So you can absolutely get away making gains without pain. Also, Anwar, you've noticed the more years you work out, you don't really get a sore after training unless you do something completely wild. But we've made progress, right? You can definitely make progress without feeling that soreness. So the soreness, like, and I get this from clients a lot. I'm not sore. Am I not doing anything? No, you're good. Put in the work. You keep putting in the work, getting better. You can make all the gains. You can never be sore, and you'll still be good.
So, and that we talked about that too, about how soreness isn't really an indicator of anything. But now I'm kind
Yeah.
of thinking, is it bad to maybe get into those like painful zones? Because I'm kind of thinking about like from a consistency perspective, where if I'm going in every workout and if I have like 5 drop sets of like chest or something,
Yeah.
like that sucks. Like there's not a single human being who likes doing drop sets, dude. It's painful, it's not fun, it hurts. Um, and I feel like that would affect your consistency because there's no way you're going to be as mentally strong every workout to consistently put in
Exactly.
all that effort for those 5 drop sets. So I'm kind of wondering, would it be more valuable to just like try to have as little pain as possible? Because that way you could be pretty consistent with every single workout if you don't really have any of those pain, and you don't have to really like battle through it.
I think that depends on individual. Now there are two types of clients or gym trainees, or patients for that matter. There are those who are big wusses and cannot handle any pain to any level, and then there are those people, and I think Anwar, you're closer to this type, who would probably get very very close or will injure themselves before they actually complain about the level of pain that they feel. And I think it's worth taking a moment to reflect on that, or if you're working with someone, to reflect on their personality type and see what that is. Because the people who are big wusses about their pain level, you have to first be nice to them and then take your time, ease them into it, remind them that's okay to do a feel more, and because they probably need to get closer, they got to expand how far they're going. Now the people like you who AMRAPs Romanian deadlifts every time you hit the gym, then it might be like, hey, like maybe you need to ramp that down for a set or two. So there is a sweet spot, right? Yeah, like the secret of training is getting to a point where you're getting a stimulus, but staying as far away from the point where you're going to hurt yourself, especially if you're recreational and not doing it as a sport like powerlifting or weightlifting.
Oh, dude, I'm trying to become more and more of a baby in the gym. Like I feel one thing off, and I'm like, I'm done. Nope, not gonna do another set.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
like, yeah, no, I'm trying to get more into that mentality because it's so true. Like I think when you're young, and well, not even young, but when you're first starting out, you're exposed to so much of this like whole thing where like, oh, okay, at the gym you're a warrior. You gotta
Yeah.
suffer. You gotta go through, and then it's BS. Like all you're gonna do is get injured, even if you hit that weight or that rep. Like you're just gonna injure yourself and then get slowed down. It's such a toxic mindset too. I mean, again, you should work hard. Working hard is super important, but like, you should not be an idiot. um, and that kind of brings me into it about like, how do you find that balance though? How much is too much pain? Like, we all know when you feel joint pain, you're done. Like, joint pain is like an immediate stop. Or at the very least, drop down significantly in the weight of reps if you're starting to feel joint pain. Um, but for more muscular pain, how do you know when it's time to maybe slow down?
Yeah, great question. So the biggest thing with are we talking about muscle pain or joint pain?
Actually, let's start with joint pain because, from my understanding, with joint pain, as soon as you start feeling it, that's kind of like, okay, you're done. Like, let's go at the very least, drop the weight, drop the reps, or just stop that movement and do something else. Like, for me, joint pain is kind of like a red light, like, you're done. But is that even the right way of looking at it?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think if you're an individual and you start to feel joint pain in your exercise, I think the safe thing to do is to just cut that off for the day. There's some more complicated stuff when it comes to rehab where you actually need to have some pain in order to rehab from an injury successfully.
Mm,
Now that's highly recommend that you actually do that with the help of a professional that's telling you, but it is, in my opinion, impossible to come back from like for example, if you have a severe tendon strain, it's pretty much impossible to come back and recover fully from that without loading it up in rehab with something that is painful. But
mm,
rule of thumb, and this isn't a very like super scientific rule of thumb, but so if it hurts during the activity and it's moderate, that is generally okay. Remember, the pain is not necessarily associated with more injury, so that's okay. However, if that pain persists, 5 or 10 minutes after you do the activity, you start to ask questions, and if that pain continues to be exacerbated the next day, then there we have a problem. Like then you talk to your therapist and ask them, hey, we did the leg extension that you talked about for my knee tendinopathy, and I was hurting the next morning. That's when you take a step back and reset it. But let's say I was doing the leg extension, and it did hurt a little bit in my patellar ligament while I was doing it, but after I stopped, it was okay. It actually cooled down. That's actually generally okay.
okay. All right, so if you do have a bit of an injury, you can kind of push it a bit. For the rehab work to kind of get back to that normalcy of like the of how it used to feel. But I guess if you didn't have any like pain in like let's say your patella, and then let's say you do a deep squat and it starts flaring up, should you continue with the squat or should you maybe just hold off?
Yeah, it's a complicated question. I think if you go in the gym and there's a little bit of soreness, I don't think it's necessary to. So I think the mindset you want to have is you don't want to instantly be like, oh, we just can't squat today. I'd say there are some things you can do to alter your pain perception, right? Before you get to painkillers, the first thing that you can do that significantly alters pain perception is to get warm. It's getting colder out here. Weekly weather talk. It's getting colder out here, but when your muscles and joints and your whole body is warm, everything performs differently. There's increased blood flow that actually decreases stiffness and pain perceptions in your body. So first thing, before you stop doing your thing, get warm, right? Second thing is to see if there's anything around and up and down the joint that can be stretched, right? Maybe you can stretch your quad, your calves or whatnot, because those might be pulling on it. And then try again and see how it goes, right? If it hurts during and it's a very slight niggle, and after you stop the activity, it's not there at all, perhaps you're good to proceed. If you do each squat and it just hurts even in between sets, you can't even straighten your leg while sitting down, then call it a day, right? Then there's probably something maybe a little bit more serious going on.
Okay, that's really interesting. And yeah, I think you have a great point about the warm up, especially a dynamic warm up and doing some
Yeah.
stretching too. Um, what do you think? And this is a little bit off topic, but I was seeing a video about this too, about someone was saying where it's like if it takes you like 20 or 30 minutes to warm up to get ready for one movement, maybe you shouldn't do that movement. What do you think of that idea? So like I think the guy was using the example of squats and he was saying like he's seen people who warm up and stretch for a squat for like 30 minutes. And he was saying like listen, if you need that much mobility work to do a squat, just do something else. Just do some lunges, do some other stuff. Like unless you're competing in this, like it's fine. Just do some other movements. What do you kind of feel about that?
I think it is. I think it's some pretentious bullshit, to be honest. Well, here's the deal, right? Like if I want to do a squat and I think it's fun, I value the progression in it. I mean, who are you to tell me I can't spend 20 minutes to warm up for it, right? It's yeah. I mean, hey, like pro athletes warm up for their events for 40 minutes. They warm up for an hour, right? And it's hey, you gotta do what you gotta do to like sometimes we don't not everybody picks an exercise because it's the most optimal thing to do, right? I don't necessarily think anymore that deadlifts are the most like I definitely don't think snatch and clean jerk are the most optimal way to build strength and power. Let me just put that
Yeah.
out there. I do them because I like to do them and they're valuable to me and it takes me 20 minutes to warm up for them and that's okay. Like I think that's fine. I think it's a good goal to have to be able to do a deep squat from completely cold. It's a good thing to do to be able to do a pull up from completely cold, but it doesn't have to be an absolute. Like it's not good to make people feel bad just because they have to warm up a little bit longer. A lot of us like sit for 8 to 12 hours a day. Of course, we have to warm up for 20 minutes. We don't have all day long to do animal flow or whatever they're doing.
No, I feel you on that. I do kind of think that from a viewpoint of time management, because like if you do only have like let's say an hour at the gym and you're spending half of it just warming up to do your set of squats, I would kind of then argue it might be more worthwhile to do like an example is I love lunges. Like
Yeah,
I and like lunges you don't really need much of a warm up. Like you can do a few body weight ones, maybe
exactly.
add in some
Yeah.
weight and you're good to go. So I kind of feel like from a time management thing I think though there is a value for not falling in love with a few exercises. I feel like you have to do these.
Yeah, yeah. There's a nuance to it, but
But I
yeah,
see what you mean too about like the
exactly,
pretentiousness about this, where it's like, okay, if you can't do an ass to grass squat right out of bed, why are you even squatting? Like, yeah, that's like a kind of a dick thing to say.
exactly. But I also agree with you. Like if you also about being resourceful. If you don't have a lot of time, or if you know you're just hurting, like your knees feel like complete shit, then like yeah, it's not gonna be worth it, right? And some days my knees feel like that, and I'll do leg extensions or reverse Nordics or whatnot. Like yeah, pick the right tool for the day.
Yeah, and so that kind of going back on topic about pain, you did bring up some really good things about the muscular pain and kind of give a bit of a flow on how you should deal with it. Now I'm wondering about I sorry, not muscular, about like the joint pain, but kind of jumping into muscular pain now. Is there like a limit to how much muscular pain you should really go through? Like should I do that quadruple drop set where I can't even then like lift my arm up without cramping?
Yeah, I think it's okay to do, but I think one thing to think about before. So some people I know in the gym, they take every set to failure. Like Amber, I know you don't do that anymore, but some people do, right? And it's actually a more common than you think. Like if you go in a commercial gym, there's a lot of people doing that, and I don't think that's necessary. And let's think back to what is the response that we get to working out, right? When we work out, we get a if we do enough, we get a generalized damage and we get a generalized inflammation response that makes you grow, right? So if you think about that, there's going to be a point where you can keep doing more and more and more and more and more, and that's probably not doing anything for you. If anything, it might mess you up so bad that it takes you too long to recover. So, without seeing a person in particular, I think the general advice is keep that in mind. Think about what you're actually trying to do, and use the super drop sets in moderation. They're kind of fun to do once in a while. I like to do them, right? Like I definitely do them for like shoulders and triceps and upper back, but use them in moderation. Maybe one set. If you're doing 4 sets, do the set at the end, really burn out because that does help good blood flow, but in moderation for sure. Not every single set.
And I was actually thinking, it's funny we were actually talking about this because a few days ago I was thinking about this. I started doing some more yoga, and at the yoga studio, when you do like warrior 2 and you have your arms spread out,
Yeah.
like my shoulders get such a burning sensation. Like I never felt so much burning sensation than having to hold like warrior 2 for like 5 minutes. Like that is painful. That's more painful than any drop set. And I was kind of like thinking like, even though this is such a burning sensation and it is tough, I don't think you gain any muscle from this. Or like you gain very minimal amount of muscle from this. And also I'm kind of looking around, I'm like, oh, I probably have the biggest shoulders here, but like and all these other people are doing so much better than me. But it's like, okay, so you don't really gain that much muscle from doing just the burning sensation. Like you really do need to have that weight and that kind of signals. Like talking with you kind of like made those connections in my mind.
Yo, that's a perfect example. Yeah, stuff like that, right? Or along the same line, like people who can do a plank, like people who just do crunches and they do like 500 of them, right? Yeah, same idea. Like, maybe it'd be better off to do a hang leg raise for just 10 reps, but that really created like the right threshold of challenge. That's a perfect example.
Yeah, and I mean, again, there is huge value in doing these motions, and even not for muscle building. Like it's not like you shouldn't do it, but it's the idea of that for a pure muscle building perspective. Like the pain isn't really the key. Like it really does seem it is again the fundamentals, progressive overload. Like just making sure if you can keep on getting stronger, keeping good form, and all that stuff. That really is the key. Um, but yeah, no, I think with pain, we've covered a lot of the bases. Anything else you want to mention before we start getting into some of the strange?
No, I think that's the key point on pain. Pain doesn't mean injury necessarily, and then also the amount of pain you have also doesn't amount to how many gains you're gonna get. That's the summary.
If you kind of think about it, that's like a really good message to hear because I think when people start going to the gym, they're all like, again, no one likes to feel pain. Oh, few people don't. Again, there's some people who really enjoy it. I mean, you look at Durian Yates, his entire workouts are just pain on pain on pain, but hey, it worked for him. Um,
Well, he only did 1 set though, so he had the right idea. He did it. He went hard as hell, but he only did like what 4 exercises in a workout. So yeah, he had the right idea.
yeah, but I kind of feel like his like pain threshold is like far beyond.
Oh yeah.
Hey,
Oh yeah, he loved that.
he's like an endurance athlete now. Like he does like these super long cycling tracks and stuff.
Yep. He had a change of mind.
Yeah, like I feel like a lot of endurance athletes could be good bodybuilders because of that. Because I feel like you have low pain tolerance if you can do any like endurance sport.
Oh, straight up for sure.
Yeah, but anyways, kind of moving on towards the strain. So before we kind of go into it, maybe how would you define a strain? So you mentioned pain, as being kind of like the sensory feeling we get from a breakdown of tissue. But now, what would be a strain from your definition?
Yeah, it's a strain. Like it really is just like a step further, in general. So where general soreness, you get a little bit of tightness, right? You get like what else? You get some tightness. It's a little bit harder to contract. You don't have as much force. And strains, if we call it 3 grades of strains, a grade 1 strain kind of looks decently close to that soreness. But now you have a lot, like now you have some tightness that really is restricting you. Like I can't fully bend my arm even with my maximum effort. But there's some notable discomfort. Now grade 2 strain, now you lost range of motion. So if you fully, like, even if you just like grab the muscle and you move it, you just don't have full range. We're probably in the middle stage of a strain. There might be some defect, like it might be like there might be a little bit hard or it might be a little bit swollen. Grade 3 is very obvious. You would have heard a pop and like stuff is blowing up. So I've torn my bicep, distal bicep tendon twice. So like pop and then like it's all hardened up. So that's like a big strain. But essentially the idea is it's a strain will be more persistent than like the generalized soreness. Like it'll be there for longer and the symptoms are more like notable. You will know that something's a little bit amiss.
So how would you distinguish between being having something strained and having something injured, or is it just that a strain is an injury, or is there a difference between the two?
Yeah. Um, well, a strain is technically an injury. Like by the medical definition of injury, every time you work out, you're causing an injury. We actually called it insult, like calling someone ugly. Just like it's a every time you work out or provide a stress is an insult to the body. So all injuries are injuries. So it's just like a graded thing, right? But it's that the question is where and when this injury starts to debilitate us. Like as a side note, most people by the age of 30 have some sort of disc degeneration. So the space between your vertebrae, there's a little jelly thing in between that supports compression. That starts to degrade by 30, and like, well, I forgot the stat, but maybe half of people, like a good amount of people. But is it debilitating you? Is it stopping you from doing the things you love? Is it hurting? At many times, no. So you can call almost anything an injury, but if it's not debilitating, might not be too much to worry about.
Man, that disc thing is interesting. We might need to have a whole fat patch physio fun fact about that later on, but I don't want to get too off topic from the strange. Okay, so it seems like so a strain. I think most people have probably felt it before. Like I think you kind of know when you've strained something, and you mentioned that good indicator about the loss of range of motion. Um, So one of the key things I think people try to do is how do you prevent strains? Like how should you schedule your training? How should you actually have the mentality of training to prevent strains? And isn't the idea is that most people get strained from maybe going too hard, like kind of going too trying to get that extra rep, trying to go a little harder. Like would you kind of feel like that's the mentality that leads to strains?
Yeah, good question. Um, so when we talk about strains, so the first thing is like what type of muscles tend to get strains, because then you can be more careful. Now the strains that muscles that tend to get strained are the ones that go across two joints. So what an example of that is your hamstring, because your hamstring goes past your knee onto your shin, but it also starts from your hip. So there's the two joints, right? It's very long and it can do two different things, right? Remember last time we talked about can bend your knee and it can move your hip. So because of that, they're also explosive muscles, and those muscles tend to tear easily because they're all long and stretched out, and they perform a lot of functions, right? So your hamstring, your biceps, uh, perhaps your tricep, sometimes your back, those muscles can get strained. The best prevention, and where you're right, is to not take your body past its breaking point. Like that's as fancy as the literature goes, right? A structure gets damaged when the stress imposed like exceeds its tolerance or strain point. So there's two ways you can prevent injuries. The first is to train smart. So perhaps with compound exercise, we talked about this before, leaving a rep or two in the tank, right? With deadlifts, maybe it's not smart to work to max out every week. With squats, maybe it's not smart to take each of your 5 sets near failure. That's the first thing to do. Train smart. The second thing to do is to prepare smart. That means when you go to the gym, making sure your body is ready, right? Trying to actually sleep enough. Trying to actually have proper nutrition. Eating the right things that support your joints and your muscles, right? Getting protein in, magnesium, calcium, electrolytes, all that stuff like that. Because when you don't, your body is more vulnerable, right? A muscle on a tired body is very different than a muscle on a fresh body. So being prepared when you go to the gym, and also when you training smart, leaving a little bit in the tank, not going past failure every single time, not being reckless with it.
I was thinking about it. I feel like the most time I strain myself is actually when like I kind of just I'm tired and I stop thinking about my form and I just want to try to get the work over with. Like
Yeah.
it's kind of like I feel like that's the big indicator. Like with maybe bench press, like instead of keeping my upper back tight, I might just be like, you know what, I just want to finish this. Like let's just quickly
Yeah.
pump out a set, and then you just don't have the right firm, and you just grind it out and you just feel
Hmm.
so shitty. So I definitely do feel like about maybe not being mentally focused and just yeah, not being ready.
Yeah, and the other thing, like in your body, right? Because when you're, let's say you're not sleeping well, you're not eating well, like your body is like already in like a state of like it's already somewhat in that state of inflammation, right? And it's also not as ready to repair. So perhaps something that you did where if you were fresh wouldn't hurt you, now you become more vulnerable to getting hurt. Like something that you'd usually be able to do could hurt you. And we've probably all felt that before. It's like, oh, that's a weight I can handle. Boom, next thing you know, you strain your back. And a lot of the time that's the reason why. It's that physical preparation.
So now let's say you were being a grade A dingus, you messed up, you're getting you feel like a strain, let's say in your hamstring. Um
Yeah.
let's play this out. You get that strain in your hamstring. What should you do immediately? Like, should you just okay? I'm done with doing. So I'm not going to do any more hamstrings work right now. I'll maybe do something else, or maybe I'll just call it early. Or should you maybe continue as long as you don't feel pain? Like, what should be your game plan now that okay, you messed up, you're feeling a strain in your hamstring?
Nice. That's a great question. And so the answer to this is something that we learned at school, and we call it peace and love.
Let's hear it. Peace and love.
Okay, peace and love. So there's peace and love actually covers both like acute, what you do right away, and then also what you do a little bit later. But
Perfect.
I think the smart thing to do really don't keep working out on it if you know it's already strained because you don't know how hard it's strained and you don't want to cause more damage. You don't necessarily want to ice it, and you don't want to use anti-inflammatories though, because we talked about. Remember, inflammation is the precursor to healing, right? So you gotta let the inflammation happen, but you want to make sure it doesn't get too bad. So how can we do it? Some simple ways. You can use some elevation. So when you go home, just like, if it's your hamstring, just like have your legs at heart level or whatnot. Compression, right? Yeah, keeping things compressed because that will control it from being too swollen up. Those are really the two main things to do, and then just protect it. Like, don't be dumb. Don't go and like, like a lot of people I think start with a light injury, and then they're like their friends invite them to go play soccer the next day, and that's when they really really do it in. I really think the gym is a place that's rare to get horrific injuries, but I think it's what people do after. So protect the injury. That's the P part of peace and love, and then elevate, avoid anti-inflammatories, compression, and the last letter here is educate. So like that's what we're doing right now. Is you should understand that with the strain, it doesn't mean take anti-inflammatories. It's not bad for it to swell. You want it to swell up. That's part of the recovery, but you want to control that, and also just like don't be a dumbass. Like it's you gotta give it time to heal, and it's really easier said than done. Like me and you have probably like there's like fear of missing out, right? We have limited time to go play and whatnot, but you do have to take it smart. Take that time off when you know you've heard something.
So before you jump into the love, because I do want to hear about the love as more of, I guess, the long-term healing of it.
Yeah.
I do want to stop here because I think a very common thing people hear, especially maybe in online communities, when you do get a strain, is like, okay, hey buddy, rest up and pop some ibuprofen, some anti-inflammatories. And so now you're saying like to kind of avoid those anti-inflammatories, and you're using the idea that you need to go through that inflammatory stage to heal. So I'm kind of curious about when should you use an anti-inflammatory then when it comes to injury recovery?
Yeah, way more. So that's a more complicated question. It's I mean the first thing is I would consult with someone professional who knows what they're doing there, but it's when it's at a threshold where it's like starting to get out of control. Like if your leg is like becoming like a swollen like a ball when it's just you're just uncomfortable or you're in terrible pain. Like it's like, it's like super debilitating. Things like that. Like that's when anti-inflammatories become appropriate. It's like even though we're taking away from the inflammation and that's not ideal for recovery, there are other things at play that are just making you so uncomfortable that perhaps that'll help. And the other thing is that there is a threshold if you're getting way too much inflammation that is bad, right? But first we do want to try to curb that by like elevating the structure and compressing first. But yeah, like sometimes you got to use it.
Okay, so I feel like people pop them. I mean, I've been guilty of this too, but using them like M&Ms. And so you're kind of saying maybe like slow down on them, and it's more so it should be used in a special case than just used every time you get a strain or any type of inflammation.
Yeah, yeah. And again, the education piece, just when you use it, just understand what's happening. So understand that, hey, if you need it for some pain relief, do it, but don't use it because I think a lot of people use it because they think it's good for them. Like they
Yeah.
think they think, oh, I have to use them. I have to curb the inflammation ASAP. So that's where it's like I think people like aren't informed to make that decision. Like understand that no, this doesn't help heal the injury. If you have other great reasons to use it, then go ahead with it.
So now, Pat, this might be a bit of a silly question too, but examples you always hear about certain foods being anti-inflammatory, and like example is I like myself some turmeric tea, and turmeric is known for doing a lot of anti-inflammatory. Now,
Hmm.
is that such a minimal amount where it doesn't really matter? Because I kind of feel like whenever I hear about it, I feel it's a bit of a marketing thing, or like just I feel like there's no natural amount that's going to be a huge impact to you.
Um, I do believe in it somewhat. I think it's because the little things add up, right? Like compare like a fried rice, fried chicken, candy, ice cream, beer diet to like generally vegetables, sweet potatoes, you know, meat, and like even like coffee and all that together. There's then a big difference in the amount of low grade inflammation. And one chronic condition is you don't want to be constantly in a state of inflammation, right? Because then your body's just always trying to heal something. So you want to prevent it where you can, and if you're working out and trying to adapt certain structures, you want to inflame that. So no, I mean I keep drinking your turmeric tea, but also understand that just because you're doing that doesn't make you healthy right away. It's
Yeah.
global changes, right? Like it's not going to undo all the bottle of whiskey that you had in the weekend. Like it all works together. So yeah, you got to think outside of one thing.
Man, the inflammation stuff is an interesting thing because I think we're so much like we're conditioned to think that inflammation is bad. Like anything that's anti-inflammatory is good for us, and so it's like okay, um, why shouldn't I take ibuprofen like every day if it this breaks down inflammation? Isn't that a good thing? And so I think people can get stuck in that mindset, and it's really like, dude, this has been a pretty big game changer for me because like I often go to ibuprofen right away when I strain something. So man, you learn something new every Natty news. But I don't want to take too much of this, but this has been an eye-opening segment for me. But let's move to love. So can you maybe talk about what the love is now of peace and love?
Yeah, the love is the kind of the long term aspect of this process here. So you've done the initial part, and that's dealt with. How do we recover from the injury? And L stands for load, and this is what we do, right? It's start to load up the structure. If it's a hamstring, you got to start first. You just move it, range of motion, get it back and forth. Then light hamstring curls, right? Then a little fast, then a little heavier, then starting to move it a little bit faster. So it's a very simple concept, but hey, if everybody understood this, I think there'd be a lot better rehab going on because I think a lot of people just rest it. And and here's the problem with resting: you can rest your way back to a functionally working muscle, but when you tear a muscle, you tore it at a certain point, right? And it's like kind of like a tire wheel, right? If there's a weak point, what happens? That will eventually cause the whole thing to blow up again. Now, when you injure yourself and you don't take the time to rehab and strengthen and get that bit stronger, what's going to happen? You're likely to tear it again. That's where load is like absolutely like so important. It's the most important thing you can do to make sure that you don't have those weak points. Like you'll get scar tissue forming, right? If you have a strain, and while you don't actually want to get rid of scar tissue, but what you want to do is you want to exercise the scar tissue, stretch it, strengthen it, move it, so that it can adapt and it instead of being all stiff like regular scar tissue, it can actually stretch and move with the rest of the muscle, be a coherent part of the structure there. So that's why you really got to load up.
Yeah, and man, I remember listening before about a surgeon was talking about with hip replacements. Like we're really good at doing hip replacements now. Like the procedure, like we've basically perfected it. But the reason why after hip replacement people have a lot of mobility issues is because they don't do the exercises, they don't move, they don't do the homework, and so
Yeah.
then it just gets all stiff and then they lose that range of motion. Like he was kind of saying, like we can do hip replacement so good nowadays, but then the recovery of it and loading it is what makes people not be able to move.
Yeah, it's people don't take the exercise serious enough as a treatment. Like the exercise is medicine, like it's medicine. So like you got to do it. It's not done after the surgery.
Oh man. Uh and so what about the OVE? What does that stand for?
Yeah, so that's like the L everybody knows. We always talk about load here. O is literally optimism. and, and hey, it's true though, right? So it's like you ever get hurt and the patient is going through so much more than just a strained hamstring. It's like I can't walk, I can't play my sport, my hobby is gone, you're upset. So it is important to explain the situation. Like now we understand that having an injury doesn't mean you're going to be forever injured, and understand that hey, soon we can start exercising it, and soon you can do stuff like exercise is done by the individual. You can do stuff to help you get back quicker, right? So that's really important. That ties to the education. The V part is vascularization. So when you tear muscle fibers, a lot of the capillaries and all those connections they start to go with it. So doing like basic cardio, getting blood flow to the area is so important. That's why when somebody tears a quad or a hamstring, like the first thing you see is those athletes, at NBA games or whatnot. They'll be on the sideline, they'll be on the bike, just chilling, right? And that's actually an important part. It's not very interesting, but that vascularization is really important. And the last is exercise. Like continue to exercise, continue to load up, and then eventually the goal is to get back to that activity that you like to do.
Damn. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I think you're completely right about the importance of optimism. Like I think a lot of times when people get injured, they're like, okay, this is it. I'm done. I can't do this ever again. But it really is phenomenal about how well you can recover from injuries. Like both you and I have had some bad ones. Like I think I've talked about before, I tore my hamstring and it was nasty. Like it was hard to walk and all that. And like now I've never had any hamstring issues since then. Like um, I've gotten much, much stronger than I was then too. So it really does show how resilient the body is, and like how if you do take it seriously, you do the homework, you do all those exercises, even if they're silly, you can recover very effectively.
Yeah, exactly. So all the other things tie into the optimism, right? Like when you're fully educated about it too, like when a patient hears, hey, you can recover, you will recover, like this, the history of everyone who's ever had a hamstring tear tells them they will recover. It's a lot better you'll feel a lot better about it too.
Yeah, no, I like that, man. Peace and love, dude. That's a good acronym.
Yeah, yeah. God, it was. I've heard of it before, but it was a lot of fun to talk about in class because it's something I do believe in a lot.
It still blows my mind about the anti-inflammatories because like I've heard that for so many like a decade I've heard that and it's just kind of like man it's crazy about how you could think you're so well educated in something and how you could be wrong.
Yeah, and it's like my gripe with like medicine. It's like all this good stuff comes out. I mean, I've known this for like 4 or 5 years now, because because I learned it from school. But like, why doesn't the regular population know about this? They're the people who need to know. The doctors or the PT students, by the time that your patient is in there talking to you, it's too late. They already hurt themselves, or they might never even tell you they're taking anti-inflammatories for it. So it's really important for everybody to know about this kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, definitely, definitely. And I think it's one of those things where like it kind of shows that you do need to talk to an expert too. Like I think a lot of times people have a lot of hubris and you search stuff online and you find like all this, but
Yeah.
sometimes you do need to ask an expert.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Or they just have to make this knowledge more readily accessible. One of the two.
True. Yeah, true, true. Oh, I mean, man, dude, especially with like fitness information, man, there is this. It's such a crazy time. There's so much of it out there, and so much of it is wrong.
Yes, I agree.
All right. Well, anyways, man, we're coming close to the hour, but I think it's the very last thing I want to actually ask about is the idea of scar tissue. So, from my understanding, scar tissue forms as you kind of go through like a healing from a strain or like a tear or
Mm-hmm.
something. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and is scar tissue different than your regular like muscle tissue, where it's like, is it like could you have full range of motion even with a scar tissue buildup?
Yeah, great question. I'll try not to go on for like 2 hours here with it. So, scar tissue is quite structurally different than regular muscle tissue. Its scar tissue is it's thick collagen fibers, which is not the same as muscle tissue. They are inherently not that stretchy. And it's your body's natural response to any massive injury as it creates scar tissue. That's part of the remodeling process. It's part of the recovery process. But what we can do with training is we can remodel it. So cells are very smart. If you give it the right type of stress, it can start to act more like muscle tissue, if that makes sense. So rather than being like a stiff band, it's like, okay, it seems like we're gonna have to stretch. So they start to become more stretchy. So that's why loading at the right time is so important in injury, to make sure you don't become stiff. And if you do that, you can actually recover from your injury. You'll actually still have scar tissue in that muscle, but you'll be able to have full range of motion because you're able to help that scar tissue adapt to work with the muscle rather than just being the stiff band within it.
Now, let's say you messed up and you didn't exercise and you didn't load and you didn't do all that good stuff. Um, and you did have that stiff band of scar tissue. Is it too late for you, or can you still work on trying to loosen it up?
It can be mobilized. It definitely can be mobilized, but it is harder. Like you have passed the golden period, and if you've had repeated, like you'll see people that are limited. Like there's a point where you really can't remodel it anymore, or it's extremely difficult to. So that's why it's key if you've got an injury, like as soon as like you're clear to do it, like you gotta start doing your mobility, or you might have some permanent stiffness.
All right, perfect, man. That's always a good reminder about just the key importance of mobility work, of really a part that's always looked down upon in the
Mm-hmm.
fitness world. But yeah, Pat, no, this was incredibly informative. Like I learned a lot from this. We have a couple minutes till we hit the hour. Do you have any last things you want to drop? Any last wisdom bombs?
No, I think that's pretty good, and we're looking to have some guests lined up soon. So stay tuned for those guest episodes.
Definitely, definitely. Yeah, and again, thank you everyone for listening today. And yeah, be sure to cop 30 of your Natty News t-shirts. You'll be seeing a post about that very soon on Instagram. Anyways, hope you all have learned a lot about pain and strain. Hope you keep on making those natty gains, and Natty News out.
Natty News out.